Well, hello, Kristina. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I do with every episode, I always have my guests kind of give a bird's eye view of their background story. Yours in particular has led you to the work that you're doing now and the publication of your new book, I Can Fix This. So can you start us off with how you came to doing this book, this work and producing this book?
Sure. So I actually started by creating videos just about my past. A long time ago, I had gone through a really hard divorce and I was broke on food stamps, sharing a small bedroom with my children, sleeping on the floor because I couldn't even afford a mattress, and just really wanted to be for others what I needed at that time when I was depressed and just felt like my kids deserve better. So I started posting these videos, just being really honest about how complicated and hard motherhood is, sort of trying to get rid of that perception of everything is great and we all have to be happy and we have to love motherhood 100% of the time. And that sort of took off. And then when my oldest son turned 13, 14, I found out that he was suicidal. And that just added a whole new level of feeling lost and feeling clueless. And at the time, I didn't think we would ever talk about it publicly because I don't share anything about my kids without their full permission. Um, but it was interesting how many of the things that I had been posting for other mothers, I actually needed to hear at that time.
I know. I find that happens so often. I mean, that's probably why even Motherhood Unstressed was started because of that same need, just to self-heal. And I feel like that's something that's so great about the work that you're doing. You talk a lot about self-awareness and parental self-work before you even get to the parenting part. Can you talk about the interplay between your ego and also curiosity, and how if you follow one, you get a very different result with your child than if you followed the other?
Yeah, I mean, even as someone who has been doing this work and like I'm so passionate about parenting and everything, I found myself when my son started struggling, sort of coming from a place of assumption. Oh, I know what this is. It's teenage hormones. I've worked with teenagers in the past. I know how to handle this. And what I realized is without even, it was all subconscious, without even realizing it fully at the time, I was coming from a place of assumption instead of a place of curiosity. And I remember hearing a friend of mine say that the most beautiful thing you can do for somebody is stand in awe of their story. And every time I say that out loud, I get choked up because it's
Mhm.
like one of the most beautiful things we can do for humans. And sometimes we forget to do it for our kids because we assume we know our child, we know what's best, and I do ask them what they need. And I like we're asking these questions and we think we're doing the right things, but when we really step back, we're not always standing in awe of their story. We're standing in awe of what we think their story should be, what we think is best for them. And I had to accept that I don't know what's best for my child at all times. I need to not lead all the time, but sometimes stand next to him and tell him, hey, help me, teach me how to guide you best.
How do you do that? Because it is such a fine line between, okay, I'm going to let you make your own mistakes and I'm going to follow your lead, versus, no, I really do know your prefrontal cortex has not developed yet. Like, I got you. This is my role. How do you ride that? Because you could go either way so easily. When do you know that it's right and true?
I mean, there's some things that are obvious, right? If our kids are doing something that is dangerous, not just for them physically, but emotionally, um, we need to step in, obviously. And I am not one of those parents that's like, just raise yourself and I'll just I believe in boundaries. I believe in teaching respect and responsibility. I think it is our job to do that. I think it's much more important for us to raise humans who can be healthy and responsible and know how to take care of themselves than be liked by our child 100% of the time.
Mhm.
And that's definitely where the ego has to go boop, because there's a lot of times your kids aren't going to like you, but you're actually doing the right thing. But I think where I'm going to talk about me, where I've made mistakes is that I have brought my own unhealed parts of me into parenting. And so whether it was the way I was raised, and then I'm just like, well, that's the only right way to do it. And if I do it any differently than my parents did, then I feel like a disobedient little girl. or whether it's about my ego, or whether it's about my insecurities. There's so many layers that we bring, right? Or another one is, well, I know what I needed as a kid, so obviously my kid
Hmm.
needs the same. Well, no, my kid is a different human being. So it's really just about, it's not about, letting your kid raise themselves, but it's about allowing your child to really teach you. And you have to really step back and pay attention for this to happen, to really teach you who they are, what they need, what their personality, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how they need you to guide them. I have 3 children, and I'm telling you right now, all 3 of them have needed me to parent completely differently.
Hmm.
And that's exhausting. And I think that's why a lot of parents are like, it's parenting as it just as it is. If you're parenting one child, it's exhausting. But now you're adding different personalities with different needs. And, it's so exhausting, but it is the best thing I've been able to do for my children. And I still make mistakes, by the way. I am far from perfect at this. But when I feel like, man, that was a good parenting day, is the times when I put my insecurities, my ego, all that stuff in the back. And I just really, again, stand in awe of their story and who they are.
Yeah. To me, it sounds like you're almost accessing like your highest self, the highest version of Kristina. And is that something that you honed through a lot of self-care? Is it something that you did through, accessing therapy and things like that? Or was it just a long process of self-exploration to be able to even do that? Because to me, that's like, that takes a lot of training to be able to just go above like that and to see it from almost an outsider's perspective with no emotional tie.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the things you mentioned have helped. Learning to take better care of myself. Therapy has definitely helped. I'm one of those people who overthinks. It's like my favorite sport is overthinking, and I'm really good at it. And in a lot of ways, that has been a negative in my life. But then in a lot of ways, it has served me because I've been able to go, okay, I don't like the way that moment with my child felt. So I'm gonna rethink it, and I'm gonna try and trace my steps back and my mindset back and see what I could have done differently. And then almost like anything else, experimenting and going, okay, what if I handled that situation differently next time? And then realizing, oh, not only does that work better, it feels better for me inside. And a lot of it has been learning to get rid of the control. And that's
Mm.
something I struggled with this morning with my 9-year-old.
Mm.
But what I realized through this process, especially through my son's darkest, darkest, darkest days, and it got really scary at some points, is that in every situation with my child, I have a choice to either control or connect. I cannot do both. You cannot do both. You cannot truly connect with the person if you're trying to control them or the situation. And control made sense to me. It's still in a way, I still in a way place value on it and have to remind myself, no, 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 because our intentions are so good, right? If we love our children, our intentions are so good. We don't see it as I'm a control freak. We see it as you're hurting or you're in trouble or you're making bad choices. And I just want to help you. I want to make it better. I mean, that's sort of like the lies I'm just trying to make it better. I'm just trying to
Hmm.
help because I love my kid. But really, a lot of it turns into control, and our control comes from fear. And every time I have parented from a place of fear, which, by the way, I don't know any parent who loves their child who has not at some point parented out of fear, because we love them so much, right? And we just don't want them to be hurt. We want them to
Right.
live a good, healthy, successful life. Every time I've parented from a place of fear, it has been a negative outcome. Every single time. It has never served me well. It has never served my child well. So I now, and again, I want to make it very clear to listeners, I still fail at this all the time. This is a lifelong practice. I compare it to working out. If you work out once, that's not it. It's not like you're done for the rest of your life. You have to keep being healthy, working out. It's annoying, but it's part of life. That's how I feel about this stuff. And
Mm.
now I really try to step back and go, okay, Kristina, you're going to control or you're going to connect? And I think I used to think, because the way I was raised, that connecting meant letting them do whatever they want or babying them or raising them to be entitled. And that's not what it's about at all. I mean, it's far from it, because whenever I have taken the time to connect with my child, they've heard me better. They've actually taken in the lesson I'm trying to teach,
Hmm.
or the, fear I have, and I'm trying to tell them about the dangers. They've actually heard it better once they felt that connection. And that's even true for my youngest is 9. My older two, my son, who the book is about, is turning 21 soon, and my daughter's 19. My youngest is 9. I noticed that on the days where we have really connected and I ask him to unload the dishwasher, yeah, no problem, mom. And on the days where I've just been parenting out of fear, I've been more controlling than I should,
Hmm.
it's a battle with them. So connection is so powerful, and it won't take away from raising good, healthy, responsible human beings. It'll actually help you raise good, healthy, responsible human beings.
Yeah, I think for me, the idea of connection is, oh, this is going to take forever. I don't have time for this. Like I'm so impatient sometimes that I get to that frustrated point where it's like, I don't have time to connect with you and, get to know why, you're acting this way because there's obviously a deeper reason. And so how do you sit with that and have the patience, especially if you're extremely like ADHD and you don't have
Yeah.
patience and you're a mother, you're a busy mother. How do you sit with that discomfort? Because, at the end of the day, it's going to be better.
Yeah. So one thing is sometimes connection does not have to take up, let's spend 2 hours playing your favorite game. I mean, those moments are great with your child, but it doesn't always require that. One of the ways, and this is such a simple thing that I've noticed my oldest son feels connected to me, is I will say to him, what can I do to support you today? It's that simple. And a lot of times he's like, I'm good. But he is like, oh my gosh, my mom's not telling me I need to do this
Hmm.
or this. She's asking me to trust myself. She's asking me, she's believing that I will know what I need. He immediately feels connected to me. The other thing I've done with him is just say, and this, again, this is when you have a little more time, but we'd go out to dinner or something. And I would say, help me understand what it's like to be you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things you can give to your child. So I
Yeah.
actually, with my 9-year-old, he decided he wanted to take me out for Valentine's Day. And
Oh,
so his dad gave him money and he dressed up and he took me out. And it was very cute. And we were sitting there having small talk. And I thought about that question. I asked my oldest, help me understand what it's like to be you. And so instead, I asked my 9-year-old, I said, can you walk me through your day? I just want to know, what is it like to be you from when you wake up all the way till bedtime? And he starts telling me this stuff. It was, by the way, I
mm.
recommend this to every parent, any age. Even do this with your spouse. Like
I
this
was
is,
just gonna say, yeah.
and he starts telling me how, when I wake up in the morning, I do this and I go, okay, hold on. So what are you feeling? Are you excited for the day? Are you not? I'm learning all these new things about my child. One of the things that came out is he said, and then I come back from school and I said, okay, you walk in the house. What are you feeling now? And he goes, well, and I could tell that he was figuring out as he was saying, he goes, well, that
Yeah.
gets a little stressful for me. It's a little tricky because at school, I knew exactly what was happening next. And at home, like, oh, should I ask for screen time, or should I do my chore first, or should I play with Legos? I mean, I had no idea that my kid came home every day and felt this. He didn't even call it stress. He didn't know what to call it. I think he said it was tricky. The way he felt was tricky.
Hmm.
And then we were able to come up with a schedule of like, okay, how about we, make a schedule of what you do when you get home. But it's these little moments where you are, again, standing in awe of your child's story. You're learning who they are. And more importantly, you are telling them, I want to really know you. And I think a lot of times, like you said, we parents think that this is going to take hours and we're going to have to play their board game that they love that we hate. And I've been there where my son's like, can you play this game with me? I'm like, "Arr." And I don't always have time and I don't always say yes. And I used to feel guilty about it and I don't anymore. I don't, because I'm human. But this kind of connection is a different thing, right? It's not just about time. It's about saying, I want to know your true self. And then I want to do everything I can to support who you are at your core.
Wow. And I would argue too, like it's even teaching them self-awareness tools, because he came home, he didn't know he felt like a dissonance going on, but then you gave light to that and he was like, oh, it's like journaling for me. Like it was always something that I had growing up, and that was a way for me to kind of figure out what was going on. You're teaching your children how to start that process. So you're not 30 and like starting to realize, yeah, I probably should go to therapy now. I need to figure some things out. Like that is such a gift.
Well, I wrote in my book how this new book, I Can Fix This, how I realized that throughout trying to support my son through his mental health struggles, I didn't trust myself. I really didn't trust myself. I didn't trust that I was smart enough to know how to help him, that I had the right answers, that I knew I was making the right appointment, that I just didn't trust myself. And I remember going to therapy, and my therapist kept saying, he would end almost each session with, just trust yourself. Trust yourself. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. How do you
Mm,
trust yourself when you don't know all the answers and you're not an expert on supporting your kid? And I realized that what he was saying is, trust that you know your inner self, trust that you know your strengths and weaknesses, that you know when you'll need help, that you know where your shortcomings are, where you need to learn. Just trust that. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is the greatest gift I can give my children, is to teach them to trust themselves. And so again, the whole thing, asking my kid, what can I do to support you today? That's a way of saying, hey, I want you to trust yourself. I want you to trust that you know what you need.
yeah.
And then I want you to feel confident enough to communicate it. So for me, it's still a journey. I think we all have so much crap that we bring into parenting. And I really thought I took care of it. I mean, I was like, I took care of this and this and this. The problem is there's the stuff underneath the stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of times we deal, it's kind of like when someone's coming over and you're like, oh, the house is a mess. Okay, I'm just gonna like move this stuff here and move this stuff here. That's kind of what we do a lot of times with self-healing. We take care of the big stuff and we don't actually open the cabinet to go, okay, but I need to look what's behind that thing and
Mhm.
behind that thing and actually unpack all the tiny little things. And that's where I think the real awful, hard, complicated, but also beautiful work happens.
Yeah. And I love how you phrase it that way because it's not just calling out this massive problem, especially nowadays. So many kids are dealing with anxiety and depression at levels we haven't seen.
Mhm.
But you also give people hope in that you say, hey, do the work, do the inner work, and do this work with your child. And it will be 10 times more connected and beautiful than you ever expected. So, one of the great things about having a show like this is to have someone like you sharing your story to the woman tuning in right now who might just be starting this healing process with her child, or maybe she's in the thick of it and looking for help. What do you want her to know? What should she be doing to mentally prepare herself for this healing work that's to come?
Um, I mean, I would start with something that sounds so simple and cheesy, but be really gentle with yourself. Because a lot of times when we're starting to heal, first of all, things are going to come out that you're like, oh gosh, I don't like that about myself. And I didn't even realize I was making that mistake. I didn't realize that communicating that way with my child was wrong. And it's very easy when we're healing to be very hard on ourselves and beat ourselves up. And so I would start with that. Be really gentle with yourself, really, really, really kind and gentle with yourself. And if you can learn to be gentle with yourself and give yourself grace and take your time to heal, not expect yourself to be perfect and not expect the healing to happen like that, and not expect to not take some steps backwards. If you can do that, it will also help you be a better parent because you're suddenly, and a better spouse and a better friend, because when you can do it for yourself, you can do it for others, where you can really have that grace, give people that grace, give our kids that grace. I think how many times I've said to my children when they were little, you know better. You know better.
Mhm.
Talk about you know better. I know better about a million things and I still do them, right? So I would say be gentle and be open and don't be defensive. Oh my gosh, I was so defensive, when things would get brought up. I'm like, well, I'm not like that. I don't parent that way. It's like, just be willing to go deep and know it will be painful, but it will be so worth it.
I love that. I love that. And so, getting into this journey, saying yes to this, sitting with the discomfort. Was there anything that surprised you along the way? Like you're in the thick of it. Was there anything that came up either from your son or just a revelation that you had yourself that surprised you?
I mean, there were a lot of little things along the way. And my son is very good about calling me on things. And so, he would call me out on like, hey, you used to be stricter about this and now you're not. And isn't that bad parenting? You're not consistent. And I immediately get defensive and then go, oh no, that's a sign that I'm doing the work. So
Yeah.
there were a lot of times where I would get called out on, or even by another parent, I would feel judged, or I would compare myself to how other people are handling things and go, oh, I must be wrong. And then realizing, no, this is actually evidence that I'm doing the work, that I'm open to pivoting when I need to pivot. Um,
Mm,
so I think that happens for a lot of people is we're all brainwashed when we're being raised. We're just brainwashed. Whatever our parents taught us, we believed they're our heroes, right? And
right.
the way we were raised when we were little, we thought that was the right way. And then as we grew, we're like, okay, I'm going to do some things differently. But there's a lot of things we didn't even realize that were possibly damaging, whether it's from the way we were raised or from society or whatever. And I think a lot of people get to the point where, again, they don't trust themselves. So as the inner work happens, and as it starts to change the way they relate to their children, like I mentioned before, I would feel like a disobedient little child, like, ooh, how dare I do it differently than they're doing it?
Hmm.
And so a lot of those things come up where you feel like you're rebelling in a bad way, or you're not being whatever you're brainwashed to be. And the surprising thing is, oh, wait, this new way is better. This new way actually works. I'm allowed to disappoint other people in order to make myself proud at the end of the day. So, yeah, there's been a lot of those moments of like, huh, I trusted myself and it worked out. Go figure.
I mean, I keep getting this visual of you like leveling up and leveling
Yeah.
up and leveling up. Like honestly, and it's like you pass these tests, these trials, and you're like, oh, okay, I did it. And I'm actually on this new purple level now. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's so cool to see that. And then in your forward, I love it talked about how you, by sharing your story and being so raw, you're allowing all these other mothers and fathers out there to do the same thing, to sit with their demons and to really open their eyes to what's going on. And I love that parenting is such an impetus for that. It's such an impetus for transformation and dissolution of levels of ego that we've been dealing with, like you said, for eons, probably completely unaware.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest disservices we do to ourselves and to our children is convincing ourselves that parenting is supposed to look a very certain way, and we're supposed to just love motherhood all the time. And there's all these unnecessary, not even unnecessary, abusive pressures that we put on ourselves, that society puts on us. And we compare ourselves, and that adds to the pressure. And a lot of parents, especially on social media, like to pretend that everything is just good. And it makes them really uncomfortable when someone goes, you know what? I didn't like my child today. And they're like, oh my God, say
Hmm.
that. Or I didn't like parenting today. Or this is really hard. This is really, really, this is the hardest part of my life. This is the most painful part of my life. People are very uncomfortable with that. And what I realized is the people that are most uncomfortable about parents being honest is the people who are struggling the most. And it's almost like
Hmm.
an envy thing. It's almost like, how dare you feel so confident to just say it out loud when I'm here suffering and putting on a mask and pretending everything's okay and don't have the guts to do it.
Yeah.
Which, when I realized that, it made me want to be even louder about it, just to give those people permission and empower them. Admit, admit that your life is far from perfect. Admit that you're far from perfect. Admit that you have awful days. Admit that you make a million mistakes. That doesn't make you inadequate. It just makes you human. It just
Right.
makes you human.
Yeah. And I would think too, if you're getting opposition, it's showing that you're hitting on a nerve. You're triggering people in all the best ways, like that's to me like triggers and things that make us really uncomfortable. That is like the seed for growth. That's what we should grab onto and pay attention to, because it's like, okay, like this
Yeah.
is a message I need to listen to. Like it sucks and I hate it, but there's a reason for that. If it were great, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't affect me or help me grow at all.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. I grew up very much with the hearing, what will people think? What will so-and-so think?
Mhm.
And it took me a while, but I realized, I think it was when my son was really struggling, is that when it really came to light how much, because I would tell you 5 years ago, I would have told you, I don't care what people think, but it was obvious I still did. And it came to light when my son was struggling, and I had these moments of, I had to call the police on him one night, and they took him in for a psychiatric hold. We had just moved to a new neighborhood. So I'm standing outside. There are two cop cars. There, my son is handcuffed, being put in the back of a car. I don't even know my neighbors at this point. And there's two neighbors across the street just staring at the scene and whispering. And everything in me was like, oh my God, what are they going to think? Do I need to explain to them that he's sick? He's not being arrested for, all these thoughts. And I remember this is the first time I had the words came to me. The words that came to me was, no, thank you.
Mm.
It was just so clear, like, no, thank you. I am not picking up that. I am not dwelling on that. I'm not going to wonder what they think. I'm not going to, no, thank you. And it became sort of like this mantra throughout this whole process because so many of us feel like we can't be honest or we have to hide certain parts because what will people think? And you cannot, I just posted today how you cannot, you have to choose, right? Between being happy and living for other people's approval. You can't have both. You cannot have both. I've tried it. I've tested out for everybody else, just so you know. It doesn't work. Okay. You have to decide. And so I had to decide, what does the happiness and health for my family look like? And I'm going to focus on that. And if I'm worried about anybody else's judgments, or what will people think, or what people are whispering, then I lose this.
Yeah.
And this is what matters. And so I think that's a big reason people, even like people keep saying, oh my gosh, you're so brave to write this book. And I think, but it shouldn't be brave. It shouldn't be considered brave to just be honest about the human experience, to just be honest that our kids are struggling or we're struggling. It shouldn't be considered brave.
Right.
I hope that someday it won't be, that it'll just be like saying, oh my gosh, my tire blew today. And like, what, we don't judge people for that. Or I have a cold. Why can't we say motherhood sucks sometimes? And why can't we say I struggle with mental health and just be open about it? So that's sort of when I think about like, what do I want my legacy to be before I die?
Yeah.
I want to remove all shame that is attached to just being a human being who struggles, and we all do.
I love that. And would you say that that is the purpose of this book? What do you want the reader, the woman to like tuning into this right now? What do you want her to get out of this book? What do you want her to take away?
So originally, the book idea came, I was driving my son back from a second residential treatment center he was in. At this point, he had been hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. He had seen so many therapists and psychiatrists and been in a ton of support groups and everything. And we're driving back, and he's in a much better place at this point. And he said, Mom, what helped me the most is just hearing from kids my age, because kids often hear from teachers and parents and doctors and therapists. And he was like, being in these support groups and the residential program, I was hearing from other kids and it made me feel normal and it made me feel seen. I thought, oh, wow. And so anyway, he suggested that we do a video, which we did, and then that turned into a book. And so originally the point of the book was, because he wrote the last chapter of the book. So you hear from a mother and then you hear directly from the teen who was struggling. Originally, it was just to help these families get something from another family who's being honest about it. When I was up all night and checking on my child in his room to see if he was still breathing, because I literally didn't know if he was going to take his life. I would get up almost hourly in the middle of the night and just check on him the way you check on a newborn baby. You put your face close to them, make sure
Mm.
this is what I was doing to my 15, 16, 17-year-old son. I remember during those nights, picking up books that my friends had given me by therapists and, mental health advocates. And all I wanted was a book by another mom who was in it and who was struggling. And it's such a lonely experience. I just wanted somebody else to make me feel like, I get it. I
Mm.
see you, Kristina. I get it. I've been there. Um, and so that's what the book started off as. And I still think the book really, hopefully, will help people feel less alone. But then, like I just touched on before, the sort of my bigger hope with this book is that it will really remove stigma and shame. I mean, every time, every chapter I wrote, I had my son's input, and I would ask him like, should I write this? Maybe we don't write this because this seems too personal, and every time his response was, write it, just write it. And I was so proud of him for that bravery. And I thought, that's what it should be. That's what a human experience
Mm.
should be. We should just be able to say it, write it without, oh my gosh, are people going to judge me? Are people going to judge my child? So yeah, that's the goal. And hopefully it'll take us maybe one tiny step forward in getting rid of the shame.
No, I have no doubt that it will. I'm sure you've heard of like soul contracts and that. Do you feel like you have one with your son? Like he was meant to be your son, you were meant to be his mother, so that his story could then be shared with millions of people around the world to heal.
Um, yeah, I believe that. And also, even if this book hadn't happened and we never shared this publicly, I have learned more from him than anything else I've been through in life. Being his parent has taught me so much. He has taught me so, which without even realizing it most of the time that he was teaching me, he has taught me so much. And I feel like the hardest, most painful, awful days we have gone through have actually turned out to be like the healthiest parts for me in my growth.
I believe that. Oh, that's so beautiful. Kristina, we are at the end of the time, but if there were any final message that you would want to share with the listener, what would that be?
Well, so I know you talk a lot about self-care,
Hmm.
and I do have a chapter in the book. So each chapter is a lie. And one of the lies was that good moms are selfless. And when you look up the word selfless means having no concern for self. And I realized throughout this process that if if my whole life is my son and his struggles, that I cannot be the best support system for him. I somehow along the way convinced myself that I can, once my son is happy, then I can be happy. Once my son is in a better place, then I can be in a better place. Once my son is fully enjoying his life, then I'm allowed to fully enjoy mine. And what I realized is that's a hell of a lot of pressure to put on a person. And I was actually adding more of a burden to my child by being selfless. And so I would say to any parent, whether you're struggling with a kid who is suicidal, or whether you're struggling with a toddler who is not potty trained yet, or a baby who won't sleep through the night, or whatever, don't be selfless. Have concern for self. You, just like if you have more than one child, you're able to care for them equally. You are allowed to care for yourself and your child with equal passion. It does not make you a bad mother. It makes you a healthy mother. And what your children need more than anything is a healthy parent.
God, I love that so much. Beautifully said. Ugh, I love that. Kristina, where can our listener find you online and get the book?
So I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere at Kristina Kuzmic, Kristina with a K, last name Kuzmic. The book is available pretty much everywhere books are sold. There's also an audiobook, and my son, I keep it being asked, my son did read his chapter.
Oh,
Um, and the book is I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child.
well, I have no doubt in my mind that this book is going to be helping and healing so many parents and, more importantly, children. So thank you so much for being, like I said, brave enough. I know that's like not a thing
Right.
now, for being open and honest and authentic, because no doubt it is becoming a powerful force in the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love your work.
Thanks.